When it comes to improving your health or losing a bit of weight, social media, your family, and your co-workers all tell you to stop eating bad foods, that you should only eat good foods such as salads, and anything that is processed means it will kill you. In some scenarios, you'll even find people stigmatizing them for their diet and actually see them as less valuable, which is completely messed up. But is food really this simple where we can slot it into good and bad categories? Or are we missing a bigger picture? In this video, I'm going to expose the myth behind good and bad food, so by the end, you have clarity and confidence when it comes to your diet. In 2022, I walked into the gym for the first time and began losing weight. As most people do, I went to social media for advice, which led me to believe that if I eat like shit, I'll look like shit. But that I should only eat real food, or how I'm undisciplined if I enjoy anything like a pizza. I was naive and didn't really know anything better. I thought by listening to the people who were in the position I want to be would mean I would get the same results if I just followed what they did. And it worked, like, pretty well. But whenever I found myself eating these naughty or bad foods, I'd feel a compelling desire to burn off that food, so I undid whatever harm. And there was a lot of shame and anxiety attached to that as well. And the irony is if you hear the name cheeseburger or chips, you immediately think carbs and bad and shit. But what happens if you made the exact same thing at home just with fresh ingredients? Is it still bad? The first problem with labeling foods as good and bad is that it's an oversimplification. It ignores the context of a situation. Because someone who may be overweight could eat a salad, but does that suddenly make their diet good when all they eat is ultra processed food? And vice versa, someone who regularly exercises, manages their stress, manages their sleep, and eats nutritious foods most of the time, yet they decide to eat a croissant, is that suddenly bad? And in a hypothetical extreme scenario, say someone is starving and you give them a chocolate bar because they need the energy to live. Would that make the chocolate bad? The amount of different examples and scenarios I can give are endless, but the point is us humans tend to oversimplify things. It's within our nature to conserve mental energy. So we can allocate this to more important tasks such as building a shelter. But we've kind of like outgrown that part of life. But what if I told you good and bad foods don't exist whatsoever? This is because good and bad are moral questions compared to objective truths. Everyone has their own perception of what good and bad is, but fundamentally, what is food? Food is any nutritious substance that people eat in order to maintain life and growth. Which brings me to my next point, because all food in the world simply varies in the amount of energy it has and the quantity of nutrients it also has. This sits on a double continuum, because on the left-hand side, you'll have foods that don't really have that much calories per 100 grams. However, they also might be very nutritious for you. As you progress further from left to right, the amount of processing increases and the quantity of nutrients tends to decrease, whilst the amount of calories per 100 grams also increases. A yellow pepper has a solid amount of nutrients, yet it doesn't contain a bajillion and one calories, relative to a handful of Reese's, which isn't that nutritious relatively, yet it does contain loads of calories. And what I want to make crystal clear is that is not good or bad, it's simply facts, and it's something to be mindful when it does come to your diet and food. Because there is no right or wrong food, only food that varies in energy and nutrients. I'm actually going to repeat that point so many times until it's drilled in your head. And you are not bad if you eat something that's less nutritious for you, which may have a bit more calories, nor are you good for eating a fucking avocado or something. We must be considerate of the language we use around food, because it can shape our behaviors and ultimately how we feel. Like, eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors are genuinely a real thing, and it affects a lot of people across the country. If you ask anyone, it's universally agreed upon that water is good for you. However, during the Boston Marathon in 2002, a tragic accident took place. Someone had developed severe hyponatremia, which means there was extremely low levels of sodium within the bloodstream, which meant they passed away. This is because sodium is an essential electrolyte which assists in muscular and nerve function, and too little of it can lead to muscle spasms, cramps, and even passing away. A few years later, there was a study on this marathon because they wanted to look at the cause. They found that too much plain water was a culprit in contributing to this imbalance. So even something that is considered overall good for you, it resulted in a death. Which brings me to the quote that changed my perspective forever. The dose makes the poison. And this means too much of anything can be harmful for you. Smoking a cigarette once, there's a probable chance you'll be fine, touch wood. However, smoking a cigarette twice a day for 10 years and yeah, you're gonna have issues, mate. The same applies to food. If you eat too much ice cream, you might get a bit fluffy and consequently increase your chances of certain health diseases. But you can also consume way too much broccoli or lean protein and it still be harmful for you, despite if the practicality might be a little bit harder. So this is the conclusion I've learned over the years. Most of the time, around 80%, you'll want to prioritize foods that rot within a week. So that's your veggies and your fruits and your meats. Yet from time to time, for the other 20%, if you fancy enjoying a takeaway, be my guest. That is also bloody fine, granted you don't do it every single day. You can sleep 8 hours a day, do all the exercise you want, do your saunas, do your cold baths, and eventually you will still die. So if you fancy enjoying a bit of chocolate or some sweets day to day, I mean, like, be my guest. Just with the more calorie dense stuff, save it for special occasions. No food is inherently bad or good or healthy or unhealthy. All food simply varies in nutrients and energy. And you only get unhealthy or healthy diets, and that depends on the dosages of the sort of food you consume, whether that is primarily ultra processed or, minimally processed foods. And in my opinion, labeling food as good or bad does more harm than good. Food can either be a source of guilt, shame, and disordered behaviors. It can create a lot of food anxiety, which detracts from other parts of health, such as someone's emotional, mental, or even social well-being. But if you can learn to change your perception around food and see it for what it actually is, as something that is nourishing fuel for your body so it can perform and function well, food can be a vehicle in which celebrations, memories, and experiences take place. You're not doing anything wrong for enjoying an ice cream or having a bake. You're simply enjoying it. That is all. Please be mindful of the narrative you tell yourself about your actions, and whenever you find yourself getting caught up in your own thoughts, ask, what are you objectively doing, not what you think you're doing. And often you're just simply eating food that may be a little bit more or less nutritious, and that may have a little bit more calories than usual. But punishment is for when you do something bad, not for when you eat food. Now that you understand that there's no inherently bad foods, if you watch this video here, I will tell you the exact food swaps that you can make today to reduce the calories yet boost the protein so you can lose weight without sacrificing your favorite comfort foods.